Are you guys ready for a day in my life? Alright, it's 15th of December. I decide that I will watch No Way Home next week because I have to work on my college assignments, group projects, reports for assignments, reports for group projects. I postpone the movie plan and go to sleep. Do you know what I dream about? Yeah, I dream about Spider-Man. I dream about watching No Way Home. 16th of December, I wake up at 12 p.m. and I decide I have to watch No Way Home and I have to watch it today. So instead of eating something like a normal human being, I run to my friend. No Way Home? Yes. No Way Home. Me and my friend run out and get into a bus and wait, did I take a shower today? Did I even take a shit today? No, and I don't care. I'm going to do something important. I'm going to watch something important. I believe I'm so excited I can barely sit still or hold a thought in my head. I think this is the excitement only a fan can feel. A Spider-Man fan. A Spider-Man fan on the start of a journey whose conclusion is uncertain. I hope it's a good movie. I hope I love it. I hope I love every second of it. I hope it's more than just a fun movie. I hope it's a good Spider-Man movie. I hope. I sit down to watch the movie.
So nervous.
So I just came out of the theater and how do I feel? Fucking hell, what a great day to be a Spider-Man fan. Yes, I loved it. By no means is it a perfect movie and by no means is it the best Spider-Man movie, and yes, there are some plot holes, there are some inconsistencies, there are some pacing issues, but that is not what I'm here to talk about today. There are times when a movie does not have any plot holes but it still does not make you care. With Spider-Man No Way Home, I did care. In these 2.5 hours, I shouted, I smiled, I laughed, I sobbed, and I cried. If you've seen my previous video on why I don't love the MCU Spider-Man, you'd know that my first problem I had with these movies was the lack of style. That these movies felt like they were made by a factory, they felt bland. Spider-Man No Way Home is anything but bland. It starts off like it's a 90s pop song. It's fast, it's beautiful, the action sequences have weight and the emotional sequences have heart. There were some shots in the movie that made me drop my jaw. Shots that looked and felt like they were painted by artists rather than shot by your average Marvel film crew. The cinematography in this movie is easily the best of the 3 Tom Holland Spider-Man movies and some of the best in the whole MCU. Also, just a side note, now that the Green Goblin and Doc Ock are in this movie, does that mean the Sam Raimi movies are part of the MCU now? I don't know. Let's talk about the characters, shall we? Because another thing I rambled about in my previous video was how the characters in the previous movies were not well defined, how they felt very two-dimensional. This movie, even though it has so many characters to manage, and we'll talk about that, it somehow manages to improve upon the characters. It manages to improve upon the character of MJ, for fuck's sake. It even takes Peter Parker's character pretty seriously. Hey, that's new for an MCU movie, right? Let's talk about Peter Parker in this movie. Peter Parker in this movie is just phenomenal. He's no more the awkward teenager who just chases other more powerful and important people around. He's no more the high schooler who just wants to impress Tony Stark or just wants to impress Mary Jane a few days after Tony Stark dies. Peter Parker is not a boy. He's a man. He's a man who has his beliefs and he makes choices based on those beliefs. Even though at times to make these choices he has to go against some people, but he does. And he fights for his values. The movie still has jokes. And yeah, like the previous ones, there are a little too many of them, but they did not ruin the movie for me. Or I should say there was at least enough good stuff going on in the movie that I could forgive it for this one thing. The only character that did not work for me was Doctor Strange. Like, fuck Peter understanding with great power comes great responsibility. This guy clearly does not understand his responsibility. He acts weird and the only reason he acts weird is so that the movie could happen. Now, before going in for the movie, I had one fear. One big fear. And the reason for that fear was there being so many villains. The last time we saw multiple villains in a Spider-Man movie, the movie did not give them enough time to develop and the whole thing failed. Even before that, when we saw multiple villains in a Spider-Man movie, the movie did not give them enough time to develop and the whole thing failed. So I was afraid that this movie won't be able to give its villains enough time to develop and the whole thing will fail. But that didn't really happen. One major factor here obviously is the fact that these villains are already established in their own movies, so No Way Home can have fun with them, and boy, it does have fun with them. But do not for a single second think that I'm saying this movie does not respect the older characters. It does. It really does show respect for the OG characters and the OG movies. The weird dual personality conflict Norman had in the older movies, he still has that. And for some of the weaker villains like Electro from The Amazing Spider-Man 2, the movie improves upon his character to make him better, to make him more than
Spider-Man forgot my birthday.
we see these characters interact with each other and it's honestly so cool. But again, there are so many of them that you kind of wish that there was more of it. More of the characters being their older self and acting accordingly. Which brings me to my next point, fan service. There is a lot of nostalgia in this movie. There's a lot of fan service in this movie, and I love that. Like, honestly, I don't think any of that fan service, any of those references and callbacks to the earlier movies take anything away from the film. I mean, God damn it. I am a fan, Marvel. Serve me, please. Serve me. I want Norman Osborn to say I'm something of a scientist myself. I love that. But along with the nostalgic callbacks, we also get his sweet conflict. And now that we're talking about conflict, let's talk about the major conflict of the story. And let me just tell you, the main conflict of the movie is much more than just, oh, the bad guys now, I guess we'll have to fight them. No, sir. The conflict in this movie is much more meaningful, much more impactful, much more personal. Peter Parker in this movie tries to do the right thing but keeps failing. That is what the movie is about. This movie is not about some guy who has a weird drone projection technology who was wronged by Tony Stark and now he wants to destroy Peter Parker. This movie is not about some stupid vacation, not about a dude who has electric powers and for some reason is mad with Spider-Man. This movie is about Peter Parker. It's about his character, his life, his struggle, his pain, his power, his responsibility. While watching the movie, I heard this line and I could not believe myself that I was hearing this.
With great power comes great responsibility.
Spider-Man No Way Home understands that responsibility. Yes, I can finally say that about an MCU Spider-Man movie. This is an MCU Spider-Man movie that truly understands that with great power comes great responsibility. My problem with this movie, and this is not that big of a thing, but my only problem with the movie is quite the opposite of the one I had with Homecoming. With Homecoming, the structure and the pacing of the movies were pretty strong, but it did not have the emotional weight that I wanted, that I wished it had. This time, the movie is oozing with great character defining emotional moments, while it trembles a little trying to manage so many characters and trying to fit in so much stuff in such a short time. I might talk about the whole thing in detail some other time when most people have seen it, but boy does this movie do some things right. When me and my friend were walking out of the theater, my friend said this to me. If there's one thing that I learned from this movie, it is that there is good in everyone. No matter how flawed they might be, deep down, somewhere there is some good. And that means a lot. That is what superhero stories and superhero movies were always about. They were about these lessons, these kind-hearted learnings. So do yourself a favor, go and watch this movie because I'm glad to say it's a good movie. I'm glad to say I loved it. I loved every second of it. It is more than just a fun movie, it is a fantastic Spider-Man film. And that is it for the video. I'm working on some more detailed and elaborate video essays, so subscribe to the channel if you want to see that. And yeah, like the video, share it, and bye.